We're on.
We're going to reconvene our meeting and continue talking about the budget and welcome the Department of Public Service and via Zoom.
Thank you so much for having us.
Go ahead. When you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. June Tierney, Commissioner of the Department of Public Service, and with me is Patricia LaRose, the numbers budget guru at the Department of Public Service. I will give a brief overview of a few things and then pass the baton to Ms. LaRose, who will walk the committee through ups and downs in our budget this year. Given the short time that we have, and I thank the chair for the accommodation of my 3 o'clock stop, I would love to have the committee simply tell me if there are priorities, areas that you're interested in that we can go right to. I don't think the department's budget is especially interesting, but my perception may not marry with yours. So with that said, I've apologized in advance for 2 things. One, I'm having a very bad hair day, and I'm going to be in profile where you will see that. But given my setup, I have to look at my screen, and I'm not sure that I can manage to look at the screen and look at you without betraying my bad hair day. In any event, I'm going to assume the committee is familiar with our mission and therefore dispense with going through the mission summary, the organizational chart, and the like. I'll skip right down to the accomplishments in this year. One I'm particularly proud of is on page 6. It's an area where the department engaged in extensive outreach for community feedback on telecommunications. We received a charge from the legislature last year to see if there are ways to change the process by which cell towers are solicited and cited or proposed for siting in a community. See if we could make the process, or better said, make recommendations for making the process more accessible, user-friendly, and community-based. And so to that end, Hunter Thompson, the director for telecom, undertook an extensive outreach project with his staff. Summary of those results are visible here. Another area that I think is noteworthy is just briefly on the Consumer Affairs Public Information Division, which many of you are familiar with because you regularly refer matters to the department from your constituents for help in dealing with telecoms and electric utilities. You can see in the years 20 and 21, there's a decided difference in volume and the like across the board pretty much from the years 22 and 23 in particular. And what I see in that is the department's Consumer Affairs Public Information Division emerging from the effects of the pandemic, where we saw a significant increase in public-facing contacts, which we fielded with great success, in addition to all of the work that division did in administering the arrearages assistance programs that the department undertook in that period, which were unprecedented in our agency's experience. Turning to the Planning and Energy Division, here what is particularly noteworthy is the public engagement process that we undertook last year in order to solicit input from Vermonters about shaping energy policy, particularly renewable energy policy. What is special about this is that, to my knowledge, this marked the first time that in the area of energy, there was an undertaking by state government to go out to the people first and to ask people first, what would you like to see in your energy policy before going to the drawing board and coming up with energy proposals, as opposed to coming up with policy proposals first and then socializing them with the people they are designed to serve. The outgrowth of that outreach was the Renewable Energy Standard Reform Bill that the department proposed to you this year and has discussed with this committee. In addition to that, we've continued our work on advocacy. With the help of considerable federal funding, we were able to establish the ACRE program, the Affordable Clean Renewable Energy Program that provides access to solar power for low-income Vermonters. Turning briefly to the Clean Energy Development Fund, This is a fund that has had enormous success when you consider why it was created in the Wayback Machine, which was to goose the development of renewable energy back at a time where people didn't think solar generation could really be done in Vermont because we have so many cloudy days. The Clean Energy Development Fund over the years has really prompted people to reconsider their thinking and has done exactly what it was intended to do. At this point, I think it's kind of powering down for two reasons. One, because the funding isn't there for it anymore. And secondly, because it's really honestly not needed. What used to be avant-garde thinking in public policy on renewable energy has become pretty much the standard of the day today. The principal work of this body at this point is to incentivize pellet boilers, particularly in schools, which is good work to do, and some remains to be done. But I would say that it has served its purpose. And a challenge the legislature will be facing down the road is what its future existence should be. In the Efficiency and Energy Resources Division, we've seen an enormous uptick in the work that we're doing there, principally because of the federal funding that has come to the state to help with efficiency and load management and weatherization and all those things that you folks are intimately familiar with. Also, this is the division where we have assigned the work for the Clean Heat Standard, which we'll be talking a little bit more about in a moment. Here you can see on page 11 the considerable financial resources that are coming to Vermont via the federal government, whether it's ARPA, IIJA, or IRA. I refer to this as the Chia Pet phenomenon. We have had a energy efficiency resources division for many years, and we go through these cycles where when there's this kind of uptick of federal funding, we sort of suddenly sprout and expand the way a Chia Pet does when you water it. And so we're very much in the process of doing that now. And all of it is great work that serves the aims of addressing climate change and the like. In our engineering division, small but mighty, we cover a lot of ground here, whether it's the continued activities with the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel or the standard fare work that we have to do from the engineering perspective in assessing petitions that involve electrical infrastructure, as well as supervising the gas distribution systems in the state and administering the underground damage prevention program. Public advocacy. All I can tell you about this division is they continue to fire on 6 cylinders, even though they're only built for 4. The workload is significant, and it is met with grace and I think good effect. But if there's something pending before the PUC, you can be sure the Department of Public Advocacy is involved in it. We are now getting down to the nuts and bolts of this budget. Just to remind folks who may have forgotten, the Department of Public Service is overwhelmingly funded through a special fund. The revenues for that special fund derive from what's called the gross receipts tax, which is paid by the utilities in the state. A minuscule amount, comparatively speaking, is from regular federal funding that we receive, and then some interdepartmental funding as well. As I said at the top of the show, I don't think our budget is especially interesting because really when you look at it, it's not very big in terms of the agency's operations and the like. Exceptionally, though, the level of federal funding, as I pointed out on page 11, is considerable now. It's I think approaching well over 100 million and likely will go higher in the coming years. But that isn't built into our agency budget. That's funding that we administer using our special fund revenues. Another way to look at our funding is on page 15. As you can see, 65%.
Sure.
Yes,
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? We have a couple of questions here pending. Do you want to ask yours now?
Sure.
Yeah,
I would go back. I have a couple. Good morning or afternoon, Commissioner. On consumer assistance and public affairs, I'm just noting today.
You mean public advocacy or public affairs?
Public affairs. I'm not sure where this would fall under, but and I've spoken with Hunter today. We've had this big outage today. with AT&T. I'm wondering how that also might affect FirstNet and where in your budget the oversight of that or advocacy of that or connection to that.
None. It's not within our jurisdiction.
So
The oversight for that belongs to the Public Safety Department.
that's for FirstNet. And then for the cell outage,
We do what we can to facilitate the collection and distribution of information on that score. But as you all know, cell companies are not subject to our jurisdiction.
great, thank you. And then going down to, say,
I might add too that when it comes to this kind of outage, it's very important to observe message discipline, that the public have a sense of there being finite sources of information. So I would strongly urge any legislator, should you receive such inquiries, to direct them to the Department of Public Service. And we certainly can chase it down for folks, but it's been a little challenging today dealing with the many cooks in the kitchen. But we've certainly done our best, and our mission is simply complicated by the fact that the companies, push come to shove, have no obligation to answer our queries, though they do tend to be good about it. The regulatory oversight belongs to the FCC, and it's been beyond my comprehension that there hasn't been word one of this outage on the FCC website today.
Yeah. Heard, Commissioner, and I think you've explained that there are no cooks in the kitchen and,
Well, that's not so. Public safety has a role and ADS has a role, but they're all fragmented pieces that don't amount to a coherent or an overall holistic picture as to what happened with AT&T. I know that you, for instance, have posed the question, was this a cybersecurity attack? Another perfectly plausible explanation is that it was a service outage scheduled at 3 o'clock in the morning, which would be a routine one. A routine window for that sort of thing, but nobody knows. And our efforts to find out have been hampered by the fact that we don't have direct oversight.
Again, understood. It does sound like no one is in charge of messaging on this. Appreciate.
Well, to be precise, the FCC is in charge, but they're not doing anything.
Yes. And I think I also had a question about how the Speaker of the House might be notified, given that she's third in line to run the government in the case that it was a cyber. But
I believe we answered that we would be happy to give her that, but that's precisely my point, is that it's important to be careful about where the public itself gets its information. That's why I would urge you to direct such questions to the department. But we're happy to keep the Speaker of the House in the loop, and there's really no need for any statutory language to that effect, but you're welcome to adopt it if you like.
So moving to I have two other questions. One is on the significant amount of federal funding that has come in. And I know we had viewed, a number of us in the legislature, that would be really helpful in terms of depression on potential cost impacts for the clean heat standard. Can you speak to the amount of time that there is to allocate that funding?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The amount of time that is available to allocate the funding, ARPA funding and the IIJA funding and the IRA funding.
Meaning when it has to be committed or else it's turned back?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, I don't have those details right at hand. My understanding is that there's at least some of that funding that has to be allocated or committed, I guess is the word I would use, by the end of 2024, and other parts of it that have to be committed by 2026. So there's a specific area you're interested in, I'm happy to get back to you.
Yeah, I think just a general follow-up on when those have to be committed by, and if we're planning any reversions there. And then my
I'm trying to avoid those with every ounce of my
thank you.
Whatever's at my disposal, because it was hard enough to pull the funding down to begin with. And I think all the activities that we envisioned using ARPA funding for, it was a blessing to get that funding. So
Agreed.
certainly that's the direction the department's headed in. I don't think there's going to be a lot of reversion, but what we can tell you reliably, I'm happy to tell you.
And then just finally on the outreach that your department did on throughout the state, I just wanted to take a moment to commend you and Director Poor. That was impressive. I participated myself. I think that work was incredibly helpful to the legislative working group and factored into the legislation that we've moved forward. I haven't seen such a robust process, and I just want to commend you all for the work that you did in that. I think it was really important and helpful. So thank you, and thanks to Director Poor.
I'll be sure to pass that on. I think it's something that the state needs to keep its eye on going forward, because everything I deal with as you know, and I meet the public at many levels, not just in Vermont, but also regionally and nationally. And the movement toward democratization of how energy decisions are made and what goes into them and what they target is, I think, something that is inextricably bound up with changing how people relate to energy. If they don't feel like they have a say, they also don't feel like they have a stake in learning what kind of energy they need to be using, when to use it, how to use it, and the like. So I think that the kind of outreach that we did is I hope, the beginning of something that continues in that direction. It's something I would have liked to have seen done with the clean heat standard as well. This was the first opportunity we had as a department to do it, and I'm sure we learned a lot about what to do differently next time. But I appreciate your noting the work. It certainly is something that was inspired by any number of legislative committee meetings where there was an expression of the desire to see that kind of work done.
Representative Clifford and then Pat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Commissioner. Just kind of a question on could you tell me what the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel does?
Yeah, although you might ask your colleague, Representative Sibilia, she joins me for those meetings regularly. It is an entity that was created, I think, in the 2014 timeframe. It was a successor to what used to be called VSNAP, which was a similar advisory body. The idea is that the body does two things. One, it educates the public and receives comment from the public about matters relating to the decommissioning of the Vermont Yankee generation site. And then secondly, depending on how the panel chooses to move, it then advises whether it's the governor or myself for that matter, or our congressional delegation on what the composition, the membership of the panel believes the state's action should be in the space of decommissioning. It is populated by a diverse group, many of whom are citizens, which I think was also a reflection of the trend toward democratization of energy matters. There are also several state agencies, myself, and then several legislators and representatives from the company that owns the site who are on that panel, and we meet at least 4 times a year. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Representative Pat.
Switching subjects, clean heat standard. We just heard from the PUC about their proposal or suggestion to try to maintain the positions that they've had working on that. Could you, and I sat in on when you testified at the Appropriations Committee, could you explain where the department is at on positions you have in terms of the budget proposal?
Of course. It's nice to see you, Representative Pat. I did not have the opportunity to listen to the PUC testimony, but I'm willing to guess that what they said was, please keep funding those positions. We desperately need them because the work we're doing is apace and it's considerable. And if that is the case, the same is true for the department. We now have an attorney, and we were very fortunate to be able to recruit two very skilled individuals to do the analysis for our role in this proceeding. And I just can't see how we can deliver on what we need to deliver on if we don't have those positions, at least in the coming year. And of course, as you'll see in a moment, that's a bugaboo for us in our budget, because for the coming year, we were instructed to fold the expense for those positions into our base. And, that's not a sustainable solution for us. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, so I mean, what you're saying is there aren't funds to continue those positions. What the PUC is requesting is that there be some general funds for that, just for your information. And I just asked, yeah.
As a member of the Scott administration, I'm not exactly in a position to make such a request. My instruction was to fund it out of my budget. I do note that the PUC filed a report delivering on the charge you gave to assess possible funding sources going forward. And at least for the near term, the upshot of that report was to draw on the general fund. The precise instruction in the statute was for the PUC to assess its own financial needs. There was no mention of the department, but they were kind enough to include us in the analysis as well. And it's generally true that what's true for them is true for the department when it comes to the requisite bodies to do this work. It's a little like, especially when you're crafting a program like this, you need two hands to clap. And so if the PUC has resources and the department doesn't, you're going to wind up with an asymmetry that will prove fatal to the policy.
All right, it'd be good to keep going a little bit. We're going to get the bell ringing here in a minute.
Okay, let me see if I can pick up the pace and skip a few things here. I think if we just go to page 17, we just had the conversation about the clean heat standard. Basically, we need money to continue this work. We're going to draw that, at least the budget shows that we're going to draw that money out of our existing gross receipts tax revenues. The problem with that is that that chunk of money comes at the expense of being able to do other things in the future, such as the kind of outreach that Representative Semillia and I were just discussing. Another one that's also at risk then is continued funding for consultants to do the 10-year telecom plan, which many of you know is also a matter that is often of considerable interest to the legislature and the public. I just wanted to point out that our budget request does not include the considerable federal funding that I was talking about, the CHIA PET funding. And that's simply because we were instructed not to fold those amounts into our budget. It's not anything that should cause concern. I just want to point out that while we're asking for spending authority for our regular operations and our regular revenues, the money that we will be administering is significantly higher in amount than what we're asking for in this budget. And all of it's paid for by the federal government. Skipping down to the budget reports, this is where I'm going to again.
Excuse me. We have another question from Representative Stebbins.
Thanks, Madam Chair. At risk of not hearing the bottom line of your budget, which we really need,
Yes.
Don't you need capacity to actually make sure you get all those dollars out the door?
We do, and we have.
You have the capacity?
We have hired, I think, at least 2 positions. Patty, you need to nod or shake your head. It might be 3 in order to be able to pursue that funding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So here we are, and it is with great relief that I hand the baton to Ms. LaRose, who's now choking up. Go for it, Patty.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to try to make this as brief as I can, but please let me know if you have further questions after your bell rings. The items in brown they're pretty standard throughout every department of state government. Salaries and wages and the relevant benefits are all increasing. We have pulled out separately the clean heat standard positions. because as Commissioner Tierney said, that we were instructed to put it here in our special fund. Going to page 20. Again, we start with the brown areas, which on this page are all the internal service fees. Almost all of them increased. And then you can see other operating ups and downs. Last year, the bottom five lines, we had asked for what I refer to as one-time funding. It was a one-time increase to spend for very specific reasons. And I didn't want, they are not meant to become part of our base, so I had to take them out. That's what the negatives are. However, the diversity and equity training, we anticipate and want to become part of our normal operating. And then down to the grant section, the Clean Energy Development Fund grants, that was one specific grant to Windham County. And as Commissioner Tierney said, not only is there the funding decreasing, but that grant's not going to be renewed for FY25. And I think I did it with a minute to spare.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Do members have questions on this? High level overview. It's clear to our budget liaison.
I could follow up separately. It's fine.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Absolutely. Take care now.
Yeah, you too. All right, members. With that, we will adjourn for the floor.
Bless you.